I had memories pop up for me that I didn't even know were an issue. Like, and how do you feel about it now? Well, I think I've moved past it, but I didn't realize that was associated with these pains in my body. Well, it makes sense because your body stores memory. Yeah, but we're also taking on, as caregivers, we're taking on not only our energy and emotions, but our children and our family. And, so we often we're taking on so much for everyone else. We're not given that same space to just be. You want to have that experience of what it's like to meditate. Try a sound healing session, sound bath. And then you'll get a little glimpse of that because they're getting that binaural beat that's keeping them there in the moment and allowing them to relax their mind, because a lot of times they can't just shut off their minds, which we don't heal people. We are that conduit of energy, and we hold that space to remind your body to heal.
Tell me a little bit about what you do and the types of clients that you help.
Sure. So I do Reiki and sound healing. I also use Zero-Point Energy and Kahuna Healing. Kahuna is a type of breath work that is native to Hawaii. Zero-Point Energy, I use a nano wand. And while I was given some guidance on that, it's been more based on intuition than anything else. And I've had the best results using it that way. Um, with Reiki, I mostly help women that are spiritually inclined. Uh, Typically, with stress and anxiety are the most common, but sometimes it's helping with um, preparing for pregnancy, or going in for, oh, the word is escaping me, when they go in to have the procedure to have the baby implanted. So I get a lot of that. And I also help pets. So again, with stress and anxiety. So because Reiki is just so comforting, and a lot of times it's because your chakras are just a little out of balance, or maybe your pet has been taking on a lot of your stuff for you. And a lot of times they do that. So when they do that, they will sometimes get out of whack because they can't move that energy quickly enough to maintain their own peace.
Do you find working in this landscape of energy and frequency that people just don't really understand how important their frequency is, or even have a sense of having a frequency?
Yeah, I get a lot of questions about chakras, and what does that mean, and is that real? And I was like, a lot of times I just go back to, well, your body actually has nerve bundles in each one of those locations, so you decipher if that's real or not. Like, I'm pretty sure, I think if our bodies didn't have that, that would tell you if it was real, honestly.
Absolutely.
And yeah, it is hard for people to understand about frequency because some of it goes back to religious beliefs, even, well, why would God give me this? And I'm not a religious person, but I can understand why they would feel that way. And it's hard to say, well, there's something in this to learn. What do you need to learn from this? You're having these bad things happen to you repeatedly and you don't know why you're attracting it. Well, what are you not learning from it? What is your shadow work that you need to face in that point?
Beautifully said. I am also someone who has traversed a lot of different faith beliefs, and in my work, navigating an individual's personal beliefs is often the most delicate part of the healing because there can be many, many layers of I can't, I shouldn't, I'm not supposed to. There are typically a lot of walls. And so do you find that when you can get them in touch with this concept of energy, do you feel like it releases things for them that perhaps they didn't
Yeah.
expect?
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of times they'll go into it and they'll be like, I was not expecting anything. I just wanted to have a relaxing afternoon, and this was a good way to do it. Even some of the people in my life that tried it for the first time, they were like, I thought this was all BS, but that was amazing, and I want to do that again. And uh, when it's religious, it can be really delicate and very hard because oftentimes they'll go to the church, and the church, whatever it is, I don't know if it's a specific belief system or not, but um, we'll tell them that it's from the devil and it's witchcraft and it's, has nothing good there. And I think that comes from a place of fear. And so then they're afraid that they're doing witchcraft or they're doing, and have to kind of walk them through it. Just like prayer, prayer for them is so important, and talking to God, or whatever they believe in, right? But it's just like a spell, just like someone incanting the same thing or manifestation work, or it comes by so many different names, and you just have to go with what you feel the most comfortable in.
Do you feel like because of how accessible information is nowadays, and I mean, like, I go on TikTok a few times a week and I see so much information about Eastern traditions and ancient philosophies and all of these, I want to call them fringe modalities and practices when it comes to healing and connection to God and connection to source, and even just this understanding of yourself as much more than a three-dimensional body. Do you feel like this rise in information transfer has changed the types of clients that you see? Because you've been doing this for more than 15 years.
Yeah, so while I've been practicing for friends and family for 15 years, as a professional doing this for clients, it is definitely interesting. And even working with other healers, it's been interesting. You get a lot of that fringe work, and you'll get people that are, naysayers, or they've had a bad experience. And I've had bad experiences with other healers, so I can totally understand where the confusion might come in for seeing all that information out there. But if you personally, I just like to go back to basics. Like, I'm just going to give you the truth. This is what it does. This is why do I want to make it sound fancy? Can I just tell you what it is and you're going to take it and believe it for what it is, or not? That's your choice. But there's almost too much information out there, and everybody wants to give it its own spin to make money off of it, which is unfortunate because ultimately I think it all goes back to the same thing. It's all ultimately all energy work, whatever name you call it.
And I
Or
love that science is catching up, like there's so many discoveries now about the way that energy works and understanding consciousness and how we all have a frequency, and I feel like the world is changing so quickly and people are becoming much more comfortable with this idea that they are nature. They are source energy. There's this return to truth and almost this stripping away of all of these things that we used to identify with that are outside of us, like giving our power away to something else. And I feel like sound healing and energy healing has really come a long way. It is so much more accepted, talked about, even just we talked about this in our chat, like the way that people are saying things like check your vibe or like get into a high vibe, like that didn't used to be common in conversation with regular folks 10 years ago.
That's so true. Yeah, it's really come a long ways, and I am very glad to see science catching up. And but it's interesting too because I know personally I've posted content that's been like, this college did a study on sound healing, and they're like, oh, well, that college always puts out weird information. So why are we going to believe you? And I was like, don't. Have a
Don't
great,
I?
have a great life. Go ahead, not believing it. It's your choice.
I think you have made a great point, my friend. It is not necessarily our job to convince the world that these things are happening. And I think that it will come back around for those individuals. And that's certainly I've seen that even in my very traditional circles. I live out in the country. There are a lot of very ingrained faith beliefs that I have so much respect for and love for. I love the tradition and I love the core values, but there is this closed-mindedness to anything new and this belief that it is the devil or that it is woo woo. And there's always this instinctual labeling where it's like we have to identify this as something because it's different. But what has shifted is I feel like people are much more open-minded, and especially when they experience sound healing. Like if you haven't experienced sound healing and how it completely just bring you in tune, in balance. That is a
Yeah.
visceral sensation that is undeniable.
Yeah, I totally agree. And, I found meditation has been kind of mainstream for a very long time. But did you know that sound healing will give you the same effect as meditation?
That's
It's,
beautiful.
so if you want to, let's say you're on the spectrum somewhere, you want to have that experience of what it's like to meditate, try sound healing session, sound bath. And then you'll get a little glimpse of that because they're getting that binaural beat that's keeping them there in the moment and allowing them to relax their mind because a lot of times they can't just shut off their minds, which I think women have anyways all the time. But
Absolutely.
you're right. Having that physical experience is just, you can't replace it. There's no like, well, I mean, meditation through years and years of meditation. But yeah, I mean, if you want a quick, easy access to something, or I've had people go in wanting answers to questions, or I had a friend that tried it who was stressed about a loved one and their passing. And then immediately afterwards, everything shifted for them. And so it was just like, you go in with an intention and it's amazing what comes out of it.
I'm
But
sure it's very different for each person. The experience must be so incredibly unique.
yeah. Well, I mean, you kind of get that with your work too. You go in with people and you never know what to expect.
I had
Yeah.
a woman recently for smoking cessation, and we went with the intention of helping her with this habit. And it all came back to her feeling powerless within her family unit. So
Mm,
it was almost like this secondary, deeper thing. And there were a lot of tears and there was a lot of emotional release way, way deep underneath the smoking. And so sometimes I'm sure people come to you for stress and anxiety, and then they end up releasing something
yeah.
much further below the surface.
Yeah, because it's just like going to get a massage. Let's say your lower back's hurting and they massage your butt and you're like, what? Why are you there? But it's actually like those muscles that are causing that lower back pain. So for Reiki, it's the same thing, and sound healing is the same thing too. But mostly I see it more commonly with Reiki because they'll go in, they'll be like, "I'm stressed about this," or "I've got these aches and pains," and we'll start working on them, and they're like, uh, "I felt your hands in places that you weren't even there," and I had memories pop up for me that were I didn't even know were an issue. Like, and how do you feel about it now? Well, I think I've moved past it, but I didn't realize that was associated with these pains in my body. Well, it makes sense because your body stores memory.
It is so important to understand that the cells of your body store energy. And again, with hypnosis, the same thing happens where I'll connect with their higher self, they will connect with their higher self, and we are led to wherever there is a bunching up of blocked energy, and we release it physically and emotionally. But I think it's always very surprising to those clients that they're carrying this thing around and that it's completely not in their conscious awareness. Like you're saying, like you're excavating some childhood memory or some trauma that they've been able to carry around like a heavy backpack. But then you access it, release it, move through it, and it's like, wow, I suddenly feel lighter. I suddenly feel confident or at peace. It's
Right.
tremendous.
It really is. Yeah. And I noticed that, I think that's why some of the symptoms of Reiki afterwards is that you feel light and floaty and maybe not all connected, just like kind of at peace. And it feels so good to have that release. And sometimes people just like the energy, but it's that release of whatever it was, that somatic moment that made it all possible.
I'd love to talk more about how you use Reiki and sound healing together because I have a background in music and I understand that there are certain frequencies that are harmonized in particular energy centers. And so, how do you use these two modalities together to get optimal healing and release for your clients throughout their whole body?
So it depends on the client. Not everybody wants to have Reiki during a sound healing session. Sometimes they just want a sound bath, and that's fine. But when I'm doing incorporating Reiki, it's all about intention because I am not one that likes to stand over or bring the bowls around next to you. I feel like it can be invasive for a lot of people because the vibration is already strong enough as it is, um, just being close to it. So coming right in your auric field is almost too much. So for me, it's a lot of intention before and after and setting the room up to uh, support that sort of healing. And I use a lot of distance symbol. I use the distance symbol even if they're in the room because that way I don't have to be right next to them. I don't have to put them. We could use a Reiki bubble if I feel like it's needed, but usually just intending that they're going to receive it is enough. And I always ask them how they want, what their intentions are. Can we focus on those intentions today? And that will affect what notes I play and combinations that are played. Um, Usually, when people go in and they're like, "Oh, I don't know, I just want to experience it," um, I'll just make it heart centered. So I'll align them with, I'll do a chakra alignment, and then I'll tie it in with bringing it all back to your heart center because I feel like we often don't give ourselves enough grace and self love that we need to be given that extra energy there so we can have enough spoons or enough energy to get through the day.
Is it effective to do sound healing remotely? Like, can you have an effective sound healing session over Zoom? Or I'm sure it is much more potent in person because you're receiving the actual sound frequencies coming through space. But is it
Um,
possible to do sound healing
I
over?
I would like to say yes, but also no. I think it really depends. Um, I feel like you really need to have good sound equipment to actually pick that up. Um, there are there have been some YouTube channels that I have found that have been very effective, but then there are others that are like, oh, this is just really pretty. I don't think that I don't feel anything from that. And maybe somebody else feels differently, and that's fair. Um, I personally don't offer sound healing online because I don't feel like it does it justice. I'd rather be for that scenario. I'd rather be right there with you. Um, Also, I don't feel like I have the sound equipment that can support that personally right now. Um, I do feel like if somebody wants to do distance energy work, then I will strongly recommend to do a Reiki session instead, and they can choose whatever sound healing music they want to play in the background at that point. So, and what they choose might be completely different from what I would choose in that moment. That's okay.
One of the hardest lessons for me coming out of the corporate world, and I know that you also had a former life in the corporate world, is driving the experience. I think that if you worked in sales, which I know you worked in sales as well, I worked in sales and marketing, we're taught to be the expert, to have all the talking points, and to really steer the client to what we believe is best for them. And being in the wellness field, especially if you have a spiritual element, that is not the case. It is often a journey of allowing the client to find their power, allowing the client to really claim their truth. And through that releasing, they initially, they not initially, they wholly drive the session. They become the transformation, and we are just like a conduit for that
Yeah.
transformation.
That's really true because I don't think that as healers, in fact, I know it's not just a think, we don't heal people. We are that conduit of energy and we hold that space to remind your body to heal. But we aren't actually healing you. It's not like a come to Jesus moment, where he heals the sick or wounded. This is, I mean, everybody tunely already knows how to heal their body, but having that space and time and the extra energy to do it is what we are lacking. So, giving yourself that gift of time to allow yourself to heal is so important.
What do you do to protect your own energy? Like, what rituals and practices do you have in your daily life just to stay grounded? And I'm sure working with a lot of different types of clients, you have to be very mindful of not taking on any of the stuff that they're releasing. So how do you navigate that?
That's a very good question. So, I always set up my room or their space because I go to my clients in person for local clients if it's not distance. But if it's a distance session, I just set up my space. And I don't just work with my ascended masters, which some Reiki practitioners do. Um, I also call in angels, ancestors, light beings, whoever wants to help us with that. And I ask them to protect me as well, me and my family, because sometimes there's just no knowing what people are going to do. And some people are not aware that they are taking more energy than they should be. They are unaware that they're what's called energy vampires, right? Um,
I love that terminology so much.
so yeah, they really like just take, and I've experienced it from other healers too. And I'm like, how do people make it when they're like that? When you're supposed to be the conduit that gives, how does that work? So it's been really interesting. But so my ritual is to set up my room, ground myself before and after. And in the winter, I have a grounding mat that I use that helps with that. And then
Is the grounding mat magnetic? Like, what does it have in it?
so
I've
it
heard of them. I'm just not familiar with them.
it's I don't know that I can describe it, give it justice in my description, but I'll do my best. um, it
It's
looks
that good.
it's just a it's I don't know if it's that good. I just don't know if I know enough about the science behind it. I know it works really well. Um, so it's just it looks like a fabric mat, except for there's a wire that connects from the mat to the grounding in your house. So you plug it into
Oh, that's
um,
fascinating. I'm writing this down. Gonna do some research.
I really like it, and you can use it for sleep too. And if you are struggling with sleep, I do sometimes recommend giving it a shot because it can make an impact. It definitely has for me. Um,
Cool.
so those are some things, and I'm also mostly Scandinavian, and so I'm positive that I have some sort of Viking ancestry in there. So I use rune work with some of those protections as well, just because I have a ancestral tie there. It feels right for me, but somebody else might feel differently about that. I have a dear friend that's a very good practitioner, and she always calls on angels. And while I believe in angels and like them, I just don't have that same connection. And so for me to call on them just doesn't feel quite right. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I think angels have been a new thing for me. I have a good friend who does angelic Reiki, and for her, the connection to the angelic realm is really a big deal. And for me, it just feels, just doesn't resonate with me. I'm very interested in it, but it's not something that just, I don't know, it just doesn't connect for me.
Yeah, I'm the same way.
I have this weird tie to Native American culture, and I don't really know why. I am not Native American. I've had a lot of past life regression therapy. That's how I got into hypnosis, was by having those experiences. And I have had many past lives and different incarnations that were connected to Native American um incarnations, and even like medicine people. And then recently, one of the soul support interviewees, she's a intuitive medium, and she was like, "You've got this Native American music playing behind you, and you've got like this drumming, and there's like a a being behind you with a feathered headdress." And I honestly, like, it just resonates with me. So I typically connect to like Native American ancestors, and even if I'm not intending to, I will sometimes just feel that essence. So it's just, it's whatever really resonates for you. And it has to do with your ancestry, your incarnations,
Hmm.
the things you're interested in. I mean, it could
Right.
be for any combination of reasons.
Right. Yeah, and I mean, I totally resonate with that. It could be another life too. So while I have relatives that are like, there's no proof that we have Vikings in our, I'm like, we are like, you're right. But I feel very strongly about this. And while they get a bad rap in some cases, I also really like that they had strong women in power. Like, I really like that because we need more of that in this world. We need more women that feel brave enough to help others.
Do you feel like that's why you may have been called to work with women?
Oh, there's many reasons why I feel called to work with women. uh, Part of that is trauma. Part of it is because I think that most of my experiences with men in this field have been lacking. My message doesn't resonate with them very well. And I get a lot of naysayers when it's male. So I'm definitely one of those people that's like, I'm not here to convince you. If you don't believe, then it's not going to work for you. Because there's no amount of energy that is going to change that. You've already closed that door. So I'm not going to waste anyone's time. It's
Well
not worth
said.
it. Yeah,
If it's already a no for you, no amount of convincing on my end is going to change your mind.
right. And I don't want to waste my time on that. Like that's not what I'm here for.
No, I only work with women as well, and I will gladly do hypnosis for male friends and family. I'm happy to do that. Well, not family, I misspoke. Male friends. I don't do hypnosis for family. It gets too complicated, and sometimes I think it's important to have that respectful boundary when you live in such an intimate relationship. But I agree. I think our culture, our society is certainly shifting towards the rise of the feminine. But traditionally, it's been a very male dominated society. And I don't just mean like male gender, I mean like this masculine energy. Like there's been this frequency of logical thinking, go, conquer, do, dissect, and for a man to be able to sit back and receive and to become a vessel of receiving is often difficult. It can be really challenging because they've been taught and conditioned their whole lives that they have to go out and conquer and do and figure it out for themselves. And it's very challenging to work with male clients in my particular opinion. But
Yeah, I feel the same way. And I think part of that ties into upbringing, being told not to have any feelings or emotions, man up, be strong. And it's like, but you have to have emotion in order to heal. You can't go through this without any emotion. And uh, that is why we have emotions. They tell us about our body. It's the somatic release of whatever we're going through. And while we can, we've got to be careful about how we release some of those emotions, right? Especially anger. Um, it can be really difficult for guys to be still feel strong in front of a woman that while they're healing. So while I do sometimes get men that ask me for a Reiki session, I more typically will have like couples sound bath sessions. So it'll be like a guy and his partner. Um, Interesting though, that just reminded me like that male gay couples are usually way more willing to have those experiences and be emotional. And those are I will work with them as well. And because they're just more open to it for whatever reason, it's a better experience.
willingness to be vulnerable is what's dropping in right now. Like, and when you said, being strong in the healing process, that requires a letting down of the walls of the protections. It requires vulnerability. And so I can totally understand that and relate. Um, I think it's so important. And I think women, being child bearers, being mothers, caregivers, it's almost in our nature to tap into our own emotions and soothe the emotions of others. We are always in this emotional state. Perhaps that's why we're so stressed. stressed and so anxious.
right. Yeah, but we're also taking on, as caregivers, we're taking on not only our energy and emotions, but our children and our family. And, so we often we're taking on so much for everyone else. We're not given that same space to just be. And so it's a lot easier for us to be more emotional because we don't have any outlets to let that go, which is another reason why I like to work with women, is because this gives them that time for self-care, self-healing that we so often neglect, and we're more, because of the way society thinks, we're more often to do our self-care for beauty, you know, and less for our inner work and our emotional healing that is so important.
Now, you are also a wife and a mom, and I'm curious to know how motherhood plays into having this business of healing, and if there are any connections between the two.
Um, well, I've always wanted to be a healer. Um, it wasn't always wanting to be a healer for people. I started out wanting to be a healer for animals. But uh, my daughter had some medical issues when she was born, and it really just sort of reminded me, when you're in a situation where you have to have hospital care and you can't do anything about it. It is so, what is the word? You just feel so weak, so incapable of like taking care of them. And had I spent more time focusing on what I could give her, I think it would have been easier for both her and I, because she doesn't remember any of that, but I remember a lot of that. Um, Being a healer now, she loves telling people that I'm a sound healer, and she will announce it to everybody. So much so that our school actually brought me in to play for the kids. And that was such a gift. I really loved that experience. And I think the kids did too. I think it was something that was outside their box, something that was like, wow, I didn't even know this was a thing. I'm sure their parents didn't either. So, and they got to ask a lot of questions and get a really grounded, non-religious, non-spiritual education about what it is. Um, because going into a school, you can't bring any of that spirit stuff in there. So it's affected me in many facets of my life. And I think it has only positively affected the most important parts.
I love that with the kids because children are so raw. They are just, they haven't taken on all of the programming and the baggage, and they have this instinctual curiosity. And I bet that was really special for them to see that and to feel it. I bet it was
Yeah,
really amazing to watch.
it was super. Just remember the kids. There was two kids in there that were just like yelling, "I can feel it in the floor." I'm like, yeah, yeah. Yeah.
And you have no idea how that's going to affect them down the line. Like, I feel like just these little tidbits of knowledge that come through with healing, because something that you and I talked about is like this reconnection with the multidimensional self is such a powerful realization that has to be felt. And with healing, obviously they're walking in as this meat suit, this human being, it's very three-dimensional. But then they're experiencing this emotional and energetic release, and they're interacting with these sound frequencies, and there's things going on, and there's memories coming up. And it's just such a beautiful thing to be able to allow clients to reconnect with that other self. And it can be so life-changing because you have no idea what they're going to do when they walk out of your office, but you know that that's going to impact the way that they move through the rest of their day, the rest of their month, and probably the rest of their life.
Mhm. Right. Yeah. My my hope is that they will remember something good from that later on in life and know that it is not so much woo woo and it made it more normalized for them. Because I think we need to normalize some of these things that are considered woo woo that are now being scientifically backed. you know, like it needs to be brought up. It needs to be seen and felt and heard. And so
How do you build trust with your clients? Because I'm sure there is a lot of hesitation to go and I'm sure some of them are just showing up for this experience of healing, relaxation, and just peace and doing something nice for themselves, but you clearly treat them as unique individual beings because using your intuition, every session is going to be completely unique. How do you cultivate that trust with them to help them release the walls and get vulnerable?
I think so it's interesting because a lot of times with the distance healing, they only get an email from me before asking some questions, so they don't get that one-on-one in-person experience. And for me, I just really try to put out that same energy that I am here to care and hold them through this session. And also, I call in their higher self, I call in their ancestors that are there for their highest good, making sure that I always say highest good because sometimes people have other things attached to them. And I don't want to be that person that is like, oh, you have this negative thing attached to you? Sometimes if I feel like it's really needed, I might be like, would you like to release anything negative that you're holding on to? Because they don't realize that there is something there. And that might be shadow work that they are denying themselves, or it could be actually another being. So calling in their higher selves and people for their highest and greatest good really makes the big impact, in my opinion, for my sessions. Um, I feel like the people that have had the best experience are already aware that they have these people with them. And it brings them some peace because they're already used to those energies there. And because those angels, divine beings, and ancestors are already working with them, they're used to that energy and more open to receiving through them than they would from some stranger. But also, people open up, it's easier to open up to a stranger that they don't know because they'll likely never see them again, right? Although I hope that's not the case when I work with somebody. But that does often happen.
Yeah, the negative entity conversation is such delicate ground because you don't want to get them fearful. Um, and you don't want to say too much. And I'm not trying to inject words, but like you didn't say negative entity. But um
I
I
think I did.
actually ha oh, did you? Okay, good. Um it is kind of scary for some people because what they associate that with is being haunted by a ghost or demons and demonic entities and things like that. And what I have learned through having energy healing, I actually had an energy healer that gasped and she said, "This dark being just rose up out of you and walked out of the room." Um, and I had been carrying around a lot of negative emotions that I didn't feel like were my own, but they were so familiar and had been there for so long that I had adopted them as my own. And I think that it's just so important for people to understand that if you are in your heart space, those entities don't want anything to do with you. If you are really grounded in a frequency of love, love and light, but it's almost like negative entity repellent. Do you find that that's kind of true with your work?
I think it is to some degree, but also it's also a beacon for some of that stuff to come because they know that uh, light workers off or energy workers often are able to help them pass over to where they need to be. And so they'll come to people like myself for help moving on. And I do sometimes get that, not very often, but I do sometimes get that. And sometimes um, another reason why you want to do protection and grounding after saging whatever you're doing after a client is to release whatever negative energy they were holding on to that you took off so it doesn't cling to you. It needs to just be grounded and transmuted through the light or Mother Earth or however you want to do it. So, yeah, you definitely don't. I've gotten sick from other clients being perfectly well and then immediately sick afterwards for not clearing good enough before. And that only took once to be like, okay, we need to do some more work here. I'm not doing that again.
Wow, that's wild. But it makes total sense.
Yeah,
I love that you used the word transmuted. Can you talk a little bit more about that? Because I think that there's this misconception, especially like I made the joke love and light. There has been a misconception in the spiritual community that you have to stay over here in the love and light and that you have to stay away from anything. Sorry, somebody just tried to call. Um, there's this misconception that you have to avoid anything that is low vibe. You have to stay away from anything that might be a lower frequency. And although that may be somewhat true, it's not the whole picture. Transmutation and shadow work and allowing and holding space for these lower frequency things I have found is so important. Can you talk a little bit about that?
sure. So yeah, shadow work is so important. I mean, it a lot of times people feel like um they can't heal. I can't be a healer because I have too much trauma. The most powerful healers I have met in my life have had incredible trauma, but they've faced it. They're constantly healing. I myself am going through healing all the time. There is all sorts of stuff that we're healing from. Sometimes it's childhood, sometimes it's not even ours, sometimes it's ancestral passed down. And so you have to face those lower energies in order to raise the vibration. Otherwise, they're just lingering. You got to help move them or transmute them. I like to transmute it into light. And one easy way I like to tell people they can do that is just imagine a bright white bubble and put all of that negative energy into it. Or like Bluey, which I know is super popular. That episode where she's like, put all the bad feelings in there. Oh, yeah, that's basically what you're doing. Just fill it with light. You could throw it and it would probably do the same thing. But for me, I just fill it with light and then it has nowhere to go. It has no choice but to become light. But yeah, I agree. You can't always sit in the light. And I think people that are saying that you can't go down that path have their own things that they need to heal from that they're not facing, right? They don't want to believe that they could, or they're too good for whatever. And that kind of goes back to the negative rap, I think, that a lot of the new age hippies have had is that, oh, I'm above all of that. Are you? Like, because we're all human and we've all had things happen. Can we just treat each other with piece and not say that you're better than me spiritually because you don't know my path, just like I don't know your path. Just have a little expect. I'm sorry, words. Have a little compassion, about that. But yeah, shadow work is really important. And I didn't really understand what shadow work was until recently. And I was like, oh, it's really just befriending your darker half because we are that yin and yang inside all of us, right?
Absolutely. And we're always working through stuff because we live in a really topsy-turvy world, and that's not going to go away.
Right.
And you can get super, super spiritual and try to transcend this 3D world just to turn right back around and realize that this is the spiritual world. And it's how you are integrating catalysts. That's how you're navigating through life's challenges that's important. And one thing you said about like, these people that are like, oh, I'm above that. Well, that's a form of judgment, which is actually a very low frequency thing because you are looking at that and you're judging low frequency or sadness or grief as bad. And you're choosing, these other frequencies as good when they're actually just points on a spectrum. They're not necessarily good or bad. It's all kind of like an equal playing field, but they're just fractals of an experience. And
Right.
I agree with you. I think it's really important for us not to finger point or judge where someone is on their healing path. I'm going through healing all the time. Um, you and I had a conversation about the father wound, and do you remember me asking you what about the mother wound?
Yeah, I do.
So I did a past life regression session, and I went back to being in my mother's womb, and then I went back to a very specific memory of her and I playing on the beach when I was a little child. And it brought up all of these emotions. And in utero, I had absorbed her fears and her anxieties and her stresses. And, I'm almost 43 years old, and I've spent 20 years doing talk therapy and, you know, balancing my chakras and shadow work and you name it. But that's that's the reality of this life. We are all carrying around energetic signatures of what we have been through. And
Right.
so things like sound healing and Reiki, I really feel like it's important to be using these things as tools, but not becoming dependent on them to be like this answer to a new reality, right? Like Skye is going to fix me and I'm not going to have trauma anymore. Not necessarily like an end game type thing.
Yeah, it's not end game. It's more like self-care maintenance. So, yeah, it's because there are so many different facets out there and what you're able to provide is not what I'm able to provide. And so while I can help move things along, recognizing what it is can be more healing than just moving the energy. But sometimes people don't want to face that, right? Sometimes they just want to say, I'm willing to let go of whatever it is and move forward, but I don't want to face it. Sometimes that's too scary. And maybe that was just really traumatizing, whatever it was, right? That can be fair. I totally understand that. But on your path of healing, you're going to come through different aspects of that. You might start with Reiki and sound healing. That might be the catalyst. And then you keep going down the path and you do hypnosis and um, past life regression or whatever it is further down the path for you. But I feel like oftentimes it'll be a small moment that is the catalyst for going down that. Because therapy is great. I love talk therapy. I love DBT. That's all wonderful. But I think it's just part of the whole healing process for sure.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think you've touched on something so important that I feel like a lot of practitioners in the wellness space are not necessarily struggling with, but coming to the realization that the best kind of clients are your empowered clients. And coming from the corporate world, it was typically a goal to find someone who was disempowered, who needed your brand or your business to fix, solve, or be a solution.
Mhm.
And there was a dependency there. And I think that that's why so many people are still searching and searching and searching because they were sold this thing, whatever it was, not necessarily spiritual healing. It could have been, like a diet and nutrition modality, or maybe it was a book, or maybe it was a course. And traditional marketing harped on the pain points so much that it made you feel like this will be my solution. And it disempowers the client. And they come looking for an answer to their problems. But what I have found, and especially in these conversations, is that the most successful healing happens when the client is empowered to understand that they're in the driver's seat, that there's nothing that they need outside of themselves, that the healing is within them, and that it does require some self-excavation. It does require some looking into the shadow because whatever you suppress is going to build up. Now, we know that from physics, right? You put anything under pressure, and the farther you stuff it down, the more it's just going to want to come up. And so, do you find that with your clients? Like, I'm sure you have a lot of repeat people. Do you feel like your clients that make the most progress, air quotes, are the ones that are the most empowered and are really working alongside you, like having those intentions and having those moments of willingness to be vulnerable? Um, do you see that like with your practice?
Yeah, I think it can be the ones that are more empowered. It really depends. I think the ones that are more open, the more open they are, the easier it is for them on that path. Because you can be really empowered and want change, but not be quite open to that change, and then resist it in the last second. Um, and I'm guilty of that. Like when I go to the chiropractor, like I go in, I want relief. I want you to do that, align my spine. And then when he goes to do something on my, like, crack my back, I tighten up. And he's like, you got to relax, Skye. And I'm like, oh, that's what I'm here for. So, I mean, I see clients do that too. They're like, I really want to make this happen. I want my body to be ready for this new embryo. I want to release this trauma so I can move on in my career or whatever it is, right? And then the last second, they're like, the fear kicks in. But what if? And so then they hold on to a part of that, and you're only able to move some of it. So sometimes I feel like the best results come from the ones that are completely open, that know that they're going to have to face their darker side there, that know that this isn't the end all solution, that this is just a stepping stone on their path, see the most benefit from it. And sometimes I've had clients that are like, I've been so stagnant for so long and I'm ready to see you for X amount of months. And I'm like, great. And then after one session, they're like, I moved so much. How often do I need to come back? And I was like, I think you're probably good for a month. Like, you need to take a break. That was a lot that we moved today. um, and they can feel it too. And if I go back too soon, both of us usually can feel that the energy just is not moving the same. And they need that integration time to let that go through.
Do you feel like your understanding of energy and frequency has shaped the way that you market your business and the way that you put yourself out there to your audience?
Yes, yes and no. I think that I just try to be as authentic as I can, and put good intentions behind it. also put the intention out there that the people that are not interested will just keep scrolling because I don't want to deal with that. Who does?
Not
um,
me.
so just putting that energy or intention behind everything that I put out and just be authentic and real and not try to. It can be hard though, because that years of sales experience, you want to lure them in to take some more time to read. And that can be tough because people just want to scroll. So
Hmm.
to catch their eye long enough to spend time to actually learn the educational thing that you have to teach them, that's the tough part.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I love that you have your niche of, I hate that word, um, of, those that are spiritually inclined, because that was a battle that I fought for a long time was, the modality of hypnosis that I do is spiritual in nature. We do past lives, we do Akashic records. I mean, sound healing is going to affect you on a multidimensional level. Energy healing is, it's I'm not going to say the woo-woo word, but it's been in that box for a long time. And so I had to stop marketing myself to people that were not in that container, and I had to feel okay with that. And I love that you set that intention, because otherwise you get into people pleasing mode, or a little bit, at least I did. And you have to navigate around like being disappointed when someone doesn't, understand, or they want to go to battle with you about incarnations, and oh, there's no proof that reincarnation exists, and et cetera. And I think it's really important for me personally to stay in my lane, but still just being really authentic to yourself and to what you want to do in the world. And I think all of us healers really just want to allow people the autonomy to move through life and find their joy and find their peace, and however that shows up, however we get there.
Right. I totally agree. Yeah.
Was it
Yeah.
hard transitioning into business ownership from being in the corporate world, like with the way that you were taught to market yourself and acquire clients and put yourself out there?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's different between being, so I was a health coach before I decided to put my Reiki business first. Um, and marketing coaching is different from marketing Reiki. And it's definitely different from the sales work that I used to do and teach. And it's it's a whole nother ballgame. I was not prepared for a lot of it. Um, and I thought I would be because of my background, but also the way you market Reiki, spiritual practice, stuff like that used to be just like 5 years ago. You would do it word of mouth by most. Flyers, you go to health food stores and post stuff up. And while some of that is still effective in some ways, it's not people's go to. The go to is online, it's where they found you on YouTube or Instagram or Facebook. And that also depends on your demographic of people too, because who do you want to attract? Do you want to attract the people in their 30s and 40s? Do you want to attract the young teenagers? Do you want to attract, the older population? That's going to decipher which social media stream you're going to go through, because that's where they are. You're not going to get, teenagers on Facebook as much as you're going to get them on TikTok, right? And you're going to get more people, our 30s and 40s on Instagram than you would be. They're in all three of them, I feel like, but they're mostly in Instagram because it's less political and more relaxing. Um, is what I've been told from other people. I'm like, where are you going? Where do you go for that information? And also the other ways to market, like Yelp or Google, that's a whole nother ball game ball game that I wasn't ready for. And I never go to Yelp for anything, but apparently lots of people do. Uh, I thought Yelp was mostly for food,
Yeah, I
not
think Yelp is like restaurants.
right. And it's not. It actually has quite a bit of the healing community there, and I never would have looked for them there ever. And
That's good to know, Skye.
although Yelp has not been my favorite, and I can tell you why later. But
Do you spend any time on LinkedIn?
I've been considering it, but I already feel like I'm stretched pretty thin between everything that I do, that adding more to it might not be beneficial for my time, if that makes sense.
Yeah. How much time do you think you spend advertising or working on your business, like trying
Oh,
to generate leads?
um, I don't really try to generate leads. That might sound terrible, but I don't want to, like, if you're not interested, you're not interested. I
I love that so much.
in my in my social media posts, I always put in there that who I am and how you can connect with me at the bottom. So if they get that far, then they can. But I don't, I mean, outside of this last couple weeks for Black Friday, Business Saturday, that sort of stuff, I don't typically push that kind of thing.
I feel like you're echoing what I'm hearing from a lot of people is that, we understand energy and frequency clearly. And it is so important to be mindful of the energy that you're putting into your business. And if it is fear-based, like, oh, I have to pay the bills this month, I have to get these clients in, then you might not be that successful in your efforts. And the people that are meant to find you will find you just keeps echoing in my head. And that's certainly what I have found is, you know, if I keep this mindset and this internal state of just having such joy and gratitude for the ability and opportunity to do this work, what I find is that people find me without me having to put in a lot of dollars into marketing and ads. And I'm not saying to any professionals not to do those things, but I think it's important that you do them in a way that is helpful, loving, supportive, educational, that it's opening a window into who you are. And like you said, like just putting that link to contact, but not being like, are you miserable with your life? You need this. I think that
Right.
those traditional what did Sarah call it? Bro marketing tactics are
Yeah.
really just not in alignment for our type of business. It's not going to bring you the types of clients that are really in alignment, especially if you are being super authentic about what you're putting out there into the ether.
Right. Yeah. And I don't think I apologize. I don't think I answered your first question about that very well. You were asking me how much time do I put into it? I put
Mm,
all of my spare time into it.
yeah.
So, yeah, I'm grateful to have a website that allows me to schedule a lot of that stuff. And that saves me a lot of time. So I can, if I have a day where I can just focus on that, then I'll just get as much as I can done. And it's such a relief because then it's not just like, oh, I have to get so many of these posts out in order for new followers to find me. I'm like, okay, it's done. Find me or not. I've put it out into the world. I've done the best that I can, and I just have to accept whatever is coming to me. It is really, it's totally different from what I was taught though doing sales, that like you had spoken about earlier, where you are telling them, they're telling you what their needs are, and then you're telling them what best fits those needs. And in this scenario, it's more like if you are having these issues, this might be the solution for you. Learn a little bit more, see if this resonates. If this resonates, then talk to me, and
Yeah.
uh, so
Like no pressure is just like, I feel like that is so important. It's like there's no shoulds in the healing because everyone's on a different part of their ascension journey too. Everyone's going to be in a different place and they might not be ready for a deep excavation of their childhood trauma yet. They may need to pick up some other tools and learn some other lessons on their path. And so what you said is beautiful. Like, does it resonate? Like
right.
that is something only you can decide. And I will be here, like open door, but it has to feel right for you to step through it.
Yeah, and that really ties into like, are you open? Are you open to it or not? Because if you're not open to it, there's no point. Um, and I think that helps me keep away the people that are like, oh, it's just like those psychics. They just make everything up. They're just trying to make money. And yes, there are people out there that do that. 100% people out there. And it's really unfortunate because it makes a bad name for the rest of us that are trying so hard to just help others. Because ultimately, my goal is to help others. And I absolutely love uplifting people, especially women, because we've been put down and told that we are not enough and that we can't be enough, we can't do enough, we should have done this, we should have done that for so long that now, like, I just want to help people. I want to see us all succeed, sort of mentality. Like, I want to see you heal because in your healing, I also heal.
Oh,
And we raise
beautiful.
that vibration of our collective together. And it's not just me, it's not just our shadow work, our individual shadow work. Doing our like deep healing doesn't just help us, it helps everyone.
One soul at a time, my friend.
Well, I
And
mean, and if you're doing, sorry to cut you off,
no, you're good.
if you're doing deep healing that's going through ancestral lines, then you're helping multiple souls all at once, right? And that is another thing I like to do in my sessions is that it's not just this healing in this moment, it's this healing this moment in all directions of time, space, reality, and versions of yourself. So even if there's a part of you that's in another reality that is struggling, this is helping them as well because
Yeah.
energy healing has no restrictions. There's no like you have to be within 300 feet of me sort of thing. This is like there's no restriction there. Energy doesn't have rules like we think it does.
Yeah. And like you said, it's rippling through space-time. It's impacting parallel realities, other incarnations. I mean, it is so super potent and can really change your relationships, change your timeline. I mean, it's
Yeah.
important work. It certainly
It,
is. So, where can people find more information out? Sorry, let me rephrase that. Not with a frozen mouth and tongue in this cold, wintry climate. Where can people find out more information about you and what you're doing in the world?
so my company is Heartwave Activation Center. So heartwaveactivationcenter.com is my website. And there is a Reiki class link right at the top of the page. So if they wanted to sign up for the class, they can do it there.
And then social media, the same, Heartwave Activation Center.
Yes, I think it's Heartwave Activation for Instagram, but Facebook is the whole thing. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, Skye, this has been just such a great conversation, and I just love everything about it. It's just great to connect with you and to hear how you are helping people and the ways that you're navigating your business and even just your own personal journey. I can't thank you enough for our conversation.
Well, thank you. It's been an honor to speak with you today. Thank you so much.